AITA for replacing my mom's emotional support doll? My name is Alexander, though everyone has called me Alex since I was a child, and I have committed an act of familial treason whose repercussions have fundamentally altered the emotional landscape of my life. The catalyst for this seismic shift was an object, a 30-inch tall antique doll named Serafina, who held my mother's heart in her delicate, porcelain hands. To truly comprehend the depth of my transgression, you must first understand the world as it existed before my intervention, a world built around Serafina. She was not a mere doll. She was a historical monument in our family home, a silent sovereign ruling from her velvet-upholstered throne in the living room's bay window. My mother, Eleanor, had inherited her from her grandmother, a woman of formidable spirit who had, according to family lore, carried Serafina with her when she emigrated from Italy. The doll was a relic, a tether to a past that was otherwise fading into sepia-toned photographs. But Serafina's true ascension to power began 5 years, 2 months, and 17 days ago, with the sudden and brutal passing of my father, Robert. A heart attack, swift and silent, stole him from us during a routine business trip. The man who had been the loud, jovial, anchoring presence in our lives was simply gone. Our home, once filled with his booming laughter and the scent of his pipe tobacco, became a cavern of echoes. In the suffocating silence of her grief, my mother turned to the one constant that predated even her marriage, Serafina. The casual, fond chats she'd had with the doll evolved into profound, daily seances of sorrow. Every morning, Mom would bring her cup of Earl Grey tea to the living room and sit with Serafina, recounting her dreams, her fears, the sharp, unexpected stabs of memory. "You remember, don't you, Serafina?" she would murmur. "You remember how he laughed at that silly movie? You remember his birthday last year?" She was weaving a safety net of shared memory, and Serafina was the only other knot in that net. I witnessed this. For the first year, I found it heartbreakingly touching. I was grieving too, drowning in my own way, and seeing my mother find a sliver of solace was a comfort to me. Serafina was a crutch, and I was grateful for the support she provided. But as year 2 bled into year 3, my perception began to sour. The crutch seemed to be becoming the limb itself. My mother's life began to constrict around this ritual. She declined invitations from friends, skipped family gatherings, and her world shrank to the 4 walls of our house and the unblinking gaze of that doll. Meanwhile, Serafina herself was decaying. The vibrant blush on her porcelain cheeks had faded to a ghostly pallor. A fine, spiderweb crack had etched its way from the delicate shell of her ear down to the corner of her mouth, a flaw that gave her perpetual smile a faintly pained quality. Her original gown, a beautiful Edwardian-style dress of deep emerald velvet, was now sun-bleached at the shoulders and frayed at the cuffs. Her once luxurious synthetic hair had grown thin and brittle. Where my mother saw a partner in sorrow, I began to see a morbid, decaying idol. I saw the doll not as a comfort, but as a cage. I convinced myself that my mother's attachment to this deteriorating object was a symbol of her refusal to move forward, to heal. I saw myself not as a son, but as a rescuer. And that was the genesis of my fatal error. The plan formulated in my mind with the clean, logical precision of a flowchart. Problem: mother is emotionally dependent on a decaying object. Solution: replace object with a superior, pristine version. Outcome: mother retains her comfort, free from the visual reminder of decay, and is subtly encouraged to embrace the new. I became a man on a secret mission. I spent evenings scouring the internet, and I finally found my savior, a master doll artist in Poland named Katarina. Her portfolio was a gallery of breathtakingly lifelike creations. I initiated a clandestine correspondence, feeling like a spy orchestrating a delicate operation. I explained the situation, framing it as a loving surprise to restore a cherished heirloom. She understood perfectly. The next phase involved intelligence gathering. I became a photographer, covertly capturing hundreds of images of Serafina. I measured the exact span of her hands, the circumference of her head, the specific shade of her glass eyes under different lights. I took macro shots of the lace on her petticoat, the pattern of her stitching, the subtle gradient of her fingernails. This process, which felt so clinical and purposeful, further divorced the object from its emotional significance in my mind. She was a project, a set of specifications. Weeks later, the new Serafina arrived in a heavily padded box. Unwrapping her was a surreal experience. There she was, flawless. Her skin was a uniform, creamy white, without a single blemish. Her hair was a thick, chestnut-brown mane, meticulously hand-rooted. Her dress was an exact replica, but sewn with new, rich velvet that drank the light instead of reflecting it dully. Her eyes, the same vibrant blue, held no history, no secrets. They were just glass. I felt a surge of triumph. I had done it. I had outsmarted grief itself. The execution day was chosen with care, a Thursday, when my mother had her long-standing lunch date with her friend Margaret. The house was tomb silent. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the original Serafina. The act of lifting her from her chair felt strangely intimate and violating. She was lighter than I anticipated and cold. A faint, dusty scent of old fabric and time clung to her. A sudden, irrational guilt washed over me, but I smothered it with the mantra of my good intentions. I wrapped her in a soft fleece blanket and carried her to my car, placing the box in the trunk as if it were a coffin. I then brought the imposter inside and installed her on the velvet throne. She looked regal, perfect, and utterly, completely alien in that familiar space. The wait for my mother's return was agonizing. Every tick of the clock was an accusation. Finally, I heard her key in the lock, her familiar shuffling steps as she removed her coat. I positioned myself in the adjoining dining room, pretending to be looking through the mail, my body taut as a bowstring. She walked into the living room. The change was instantaneous and profound. It wasn't a startle, it was a full system shutdown. Her body, usually soft and relaxed at home, went rigid. She didn't gasp or cry out. She simply stopped. Her purse slipped from her fingers and thudded softly onto the carpet. Her eyes were locked on the doll. She took one slow, hesitant step forward, then another. Her hand rose, her fingers trembling slightly, reaching out as if to touch a mirage. They stopped an inch from the doll's perfect cheek and recoiled. "Mom," I said, my voice artificially bright, cutting through the thick silence. Surprise. She didn't turn. Her gaze remained fixed on the stranger in the window. I noticed Serafina was getting a little fragile, worn out. So I had a new one made for you. An exact replica, but better. She's perfect, don't you think? No more cracks, no more fading. The silence that followed was a physical weight. When she finally spoke, her voice was not her own. It was a dry, rustling whisper, stripped of all emotion. "Where is she?" "She's safe," I said, a note of desperation creeping into my cheerful facade. "I have the old one put away. I thought this would be better. A fresh start." That's when she turned to look at me, and in her eyes, I saw it all. The 5 years of grief, the carefully built sanctuary, the trust she had in me. It all shattered in an instant. The devastation there was so absolute it felt like a blow to my chest. You took her?" The whisper was sharper now, laced with a disbelieving horror. "You went into my home, and you stole her from me?" Her voice broke. "Alex, that thing is not Serafina. She is a pretender, a plastic ghost." Tears, silent and profuse, began to stream down her face, but she made no move to wipe them away. She knew your father's voice. She knew the sound of his footsteps. She held all my words. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. How could you not understand?" She didn't yell. She simply folded into the armchair, her body collapsing in on itself as silent, shuddering sobs racked her frame. It was the raw, unfiltered grief of the first day, resurrected by my own hand. I stood there, my explanations, my justifications, turning to dust in my mouth. I had not fixed anything. I had only broken it more. The aftermath was swift and merciless. My mother retreated to her bedroom, the door clicking shut with a sound of finality. The sound of her muffled weeping from behind that door is a sound that will be etched into my soul forever. I was left alone in the living room with the perfect, silent imposter, the weight of my actions crushing me. I called my sister, Sarah. I stammered out the story, my voice thick with shame. She arrived within minutes, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. She brushed past me without a word and went to our mother's room. When she emerged much later, her eyes were red-rimmed and hard. "Are you insane, Alex?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "What gave you the right?" Did you ever stop for 1 second to think? To talk to her? To talk to me? That doll wasn't a piece of furniture. It was her therapy. It was the one thing she felt she could talk to without judgment. And you treated it like a piece of trash to be taken out with the recycling. The word recycling hit me with the force of a physical blow. That's all my grand, loving gesture was to them, a callous act of disposal. So, I put the question to you, to the court of public opinion. Am I the asshole? Let's dissect the anatomy of my mistake. In my defense, I acted from a place of profound, if misguided, love. My concern was genuine. I watched my mother, the woman who raised me, seemingly trapped in a cycle of grief, her world orbiting a decaying object. I wanted to break that cycle. I invested not just a significant amount of money, but weeks of meticulous planning and emotional energy into what I believed was a compassionate solution. I saw myself as the clear-eyed pragmatist, the problem solver. I believed I was giving her the essence of her comfort, purified from the painful aesthetics of decay. In my mind, I was replacing a tattered security blanket with a new, warm, clean one. The overwhelming case against me. This is the truth that has become my prison. My actions were a profound violation of autonomy and trust. I diagnosed a problem she did not have and prescribed a solution she did not want. Serafina was not an object. She was a vessel. For 5 years, my mother had poured her soul into that porcelain shell. Every whispered memory, every tear, every moment of quiet despair and fragile hope had been absorbed into its very essence. That crack on its face wasn't a flaw. It was a scar earned through loyal service. The fading of its dress was the patina of shared survival. By replacing her, I didn't just swap a doll. I declared that her grief, her process, her very method of survival was invalid and needed to be upgraded. I was arrogant, condescending, and I treated the sacred landscape of her heart like a home improvement project. I didn't just cross a boundary. I bulldozed it, believing I was building a better view. In the weeks that have followed, we exist in a new, fragile reality. My first act was one of panicked contrition. I retrieved the original Serafina from the car trunk and brought the box to my mother's bedroom door. I left it there like a supplicant leaving an offering at a shrine. She opened the door, retrieved the box, and I heard the soft, cooing sounds she made, sounds of apology and comfort directed at the doll. She has not directed any such sounds toward me. The original Serafina is back in her chair. The new one resides in the darkness of my closet, a sleek, beautiful ghost haunting me. My mother and I speak. We discuss the weather, the mail, what to have for dinner. It is the polite, hollow conversation of two strangers sharing a space. The warmth, the easy laughter, the unspoken understanding that was the bedrock of our relationship, it's gone. The trust is shattered, and the shards are too numerous and too sharp to ever be fully gathered. My sister is civil but distant. The family unit, once resilient, now feels like a precarious structure, damaged at its core. The lasting lesson I have learned is a brutal one. There is a fundamental, unbridgeable difference between supporting someone and managing them. Support is offered from a place of equality and respect. It listens. Management is imposed from a place of superiority. It dictates. I tried to manage my mother's grief because I was uncomfortable with its duration and its form. I wanted it to be neater, quieter, less inconvenient. My action, though wrapped in the language of love, was at its heart selfish. I thought I was being the adult. I see now I was a child, unable to sit with the messy, complicated, and enduring reality of another person's pain. I wanted a solution, and grief is not a problem to be solved. It is a terrain to be inhabited. So, I leave you with this final, lingering question, one I now grapple with every time I see my mother glance at Serafina with a mix of love and fresh sorrow. At what point does our love for someone become a license to redesign their inner world? And when does our desire to help become a selfish refusal to accept the painful truth we simply do not want to witness? If you have your own story, a time you overstepped with good intentions, or a unique, misunderstood bond in your own family, please share it. Tell me. Your judgment, your experiences, might help me find a way to navigate the desolate landscape I have created and to truly understand the monumental cost of a good intention executed with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The story ends here, but our journey doesn't have to. If you want to join me for the next tale, please subscribe and ring that bell. Your support means everything. Thanks for watching.